I'm Maryn.
And I'm Christie.
And you're listening to Hung, a podcast where we talk about true crime from the court of law to the court of public opinion. Welcome back to the official final episode.
That's right.
The Kouri Richins.
Final episode.
Yeah. If you were early listening to our last episode, you might have heard it 3 times.
Or you might have been, like, what? 6.5 hours? What? I mean, I guess here's the reality. If we really were going to finish all of the information in one recording, it probably would have been about 6.5 hours. So,
probably 4 maybe.
Yeah, more. Yeah.
But yeah, luckily we caught that pretty early on. I was just listening in the car. I clicked on it. I was like, 6.5 hours. I called mom right away. I know we talk a lot, but that doesn't seem quite right.
That's right. Yeah. If you're one of the handful of people who got the original,
and downloaded it,
hang on to it. It's going to be a collector's edition because
because this. So it does the whole edited version, and then it starts over, but the uncut version, and then it starts the uncut version another time.
That's right.
So you'd even have it sans edit. But anywho. All right, so we get to all the extra stuff right now, all the trimmings. So we will start with the verdict. We learned in our last recording that she had 5 separate charges. Aggravated murder, attempted aggravated murder, as well as 2 counts of insurance fraud and 1 count of forgery. After 3 hours.
What?
3 hours of deliberation.
3 hours?
Yeah. She was found guilty on all counts.
Wow.
Yeah.
Even the attempted.
Yeah.
Wow.
Which is interesting, and I kind of agree with you. It's kind of shaky standing for me as far as the poisoning attempt goes, but the fact that she had communication with Carmen, it seems like she made a drug deal right beforehand. He had a reaction.
Right, and she did say, then, I need something stronger. Well, so there is that connection of, like, is it...
The first one didn't work.
Right, exactly.
Well, it's also, she lies too much for me about the whole thing. If she's innocent, why is she lying? Why is she saying, I was with him, he didn't blah, blah, blah. If she was innocent, she could be like, oh, I wasn't there, but, yeah,
right.
It's just weird to lie about it. So,
that is weird.
I don't know, but maybe sometimes people just lie for no good reason.
It's really 3 hours? That is so fast.
So fast. And so it was a 12-person jury, but they had 8 actual jurors and 4 alternates, which I don't know if that's common or not, but she made a comment about 8 people, blah, 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 and I was like, 8? So I had to look that up.
It would be so hard. I'm thinking about being one of those 4 people. Some cases I've heard, they don't know if they're an alternate or not, which I think is a good idea, because if you're like, I'm an alternate, and you feel like I don't have to pay as close of attention to things because I'm probably not going to be in on this decision anyway. But I do think it would be hard to be super invested, and you've spent all this time, and then they say, thanks very much, we don't need you, and your opinion isn't going to count, and you have to leave.
They can't talk about it the whole time, so you don't ever get to talk about it and how you feel about it and whatever. I guess I always imagined that 12 people have to decide together, and is that not usually the case? Is it actually less plus alternates?
So in Utah, it can be anywhere from 6 to 12. Depends on the type of case.
Okay. Sentencing occurred on May 13th, 2026, and happened to be, I don't know if it was on purpose or not, but that is actually Eric's birthday.
Oh.
Would have been his 44th birthday.
Wow.
Yeah, so even more emotional for those
the family
thoughts. And so at the sentencing, they have people kind of from both sides giving statements, because in the sentencing, the judge is taking in information, trying to decide. So they've given guilty here. So he only has the choice between life with opportunity for parole or life without parole. So for the side of the state, Katie, which is one of Eric's sisters, spoke, and she said a lot of things like, Eric was taken by a person that he should have been able to trust, the person he should have trusted most in the world. And Kouri looked pretty incredulous. It was interesting hearing you talk about it versus actually seeing it, and maybe it was even more so during this. I don't have anything to compare it to, but at this point,
probably the same, to be honest, because she really had that look a lot like, are you serious right now? I mean, just like, really.
She definitely had that, and she also did a lot of just like scoffing, like, oh, I can't, blah, 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 and like talking to her lawyers and shaking her head. I feel like she may have had some limitations on what she could or what she was supposed to show in court, and maybe those were kind of lifted as far as this, or maybe she just didn't care at that point. I mean, she made those faces quite a bit. She was even more so, she was kind of like, with that sentence, like, oh, he was betrayed by the person who he should have trusted most, which was his wife, was kind of like a, really? You're going to say that kind of look? But then was even more pronounced when she said that the kids would have to go through life without their dad because their mother planned and carried out his murder.
Okay, so I'm trying to imagine if I was innocent and I knew that this verdict was an unjust verdict, that I did not do this, right? Then I can understand having that type of expression and just being flabbergasted. The weird thing to me is that I watched her with that expression on things that then were proven to be true. So now I don't know what to think. But just saying, let's just assume she really, like, I really didn't do anything. I really didn't do it. Then, okay, that face would make sense.
Sure. I mean, and I don't know, it has been a couple years since, so maybe things aren't as fresh as far as, like, I could imagine being very emotional.
Yeah.
We already heard a lot about her financial shortcomings, but Katie also shared that Kouri drained the personal bank account set up for her children's college funds.
Yikes.
And also funneled their Social Security benefits to individuals who were not taking care of the boys. And she says that Kouri claims that Katie hacked into her bank accounts and forged her bank statements. So she's saying she has all these bad bank statements, and she's saying, oh no, Katie hacked into stuff and she's the one who forged all these documents and whatever.
Wow.
But instead of forging them to make them look good, she was forging them to make them look bad.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. Amy also took the stand, and she talked about how they had to grieve in public and faced a lot of public scrutiny. She also said that she received a text message from an unknown number, probably received many, but at this point had received one that said, "You think you're funny? Kouri will get the last laugh. Your jealousy is as disgusting as your family." Of course, she reported that to law enforcement, and they were able to confirm through a warrant that the message came from Kouri.
Wow.
Yeah, which of course she, again, was like so incredulous over.
Because they got a burner phone and connected it to her name and sent the message to themselves, and
right. Yeah.
I don't know. I just like, to me, if I were the judge, I would just be watching her behavior and the way she's responding to things and her disrespect of these other people and say, yeah, no, you're not getting out ever.
No, and it seems in line with something she might do as far as, well, maybe not sending it to her, but as far as things said amongst her family and that walk the dog letter, right, of like, we'll get those bitches, and
right.
And wouldn't it be so funny about the book,
right,
about changing the name or something?
Name, right.
Yeah. Amy also claimed that Eric was not Kouri's only victim. She also shared that because of all the stress of everything, that she lost a pregnancy of twins.
Aww.
Which was sad.
That is
and
really
hard.
Sad.
Both sisters shared. So Katie spoke first and then Amy spoke, and she said, "I didn't know until now or until later that we both had been begging Eric to leave."
That's interesting, because I did feel like in trial that both Katie and Clint said we just supported him whatever he did, whether he stayed with Kouri or he got a divorce. And I think that can still be true, that they supported him regardless of his decision, but Katie didn't say, yeah, I really wanted him to leave her.
Mm-hmm. But at least Amy said that he said that he didn't want to leave her because of the boys. I don't know if it was just, there's the normal reason to stay together for your children, which is to not put them through the trauma of your parents being divorced. But they also kind of hinted that he was afraid to leave them alone with her, which they made it sound more so that he had a fear of what might happen to them with her. They did have a couple of different therapists come and read statements from Kouri's children. They didn't come themselves, but they read written statements by the boys. They read them verbatim. And all three called her Kouri, didn't call her mom at all. They talked about how they felt that their mom mistreated them, not just about the impact of the crime. Obviously, they talked about Kouri took my dad away from me, those kinds of things, but also made a lot of claims of negligence to them and to animals that they owned, that you wouldn't let the dog go outside, and then when he peed in the house, you yelled at him or hit him.
The idea of her getting up to let the dog out of the house to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night, probably no.
Right, probably no. Or you wouldn't give our rabbits food or water and they died, things of that nature.
Wow.
And then you were drunk all the time and you never would take care of us and those kinds of things.
It's so interesting when you think about how Kouri characterized Eric as doing those things.
Right,
he was
right.
always using drugs all the time, and I have pictures of him passed out on the floor or whatever. It's interesting if that was actually true for her, but she's projecting that onto Eric. Well, he was doing this, and which is the same thing, like with the mortgage broker or whoever talked to her, where she's saying, oh, well, I just found out that my husband did all of this and this and this, and the things that she's describing are actually things that she did. It's so interesting. That actually is like, okay, anything that she said Eric did, probably she was doing.
Well, and at least, I mean, they didn't claim abuse as far as her hitting them or things like that, but definitely neglect. But it also tracks with all the other things that she had going on for her, right? Her business, she was very hyper-focused in her business. She had a relationship on the side and also her husband. So they could very easily fall to the wayside.
Right. And some of these properties that she bought, there was one out in Roy. There were quite a few down in the Salt Lake Valley area. So just trying to flip houses like that. I know she had people doing work for her, but I can imagine she's traveling quite a bit to go down to those houses. And I would imagine that provided a lot of cover for her to get together with Josh, because I have to go to, well, and plus he was working for her on these flips. So
for free.
Yeah.
They all asked the judge to give Kouri the harshest sentence. The oldest ended his statement with the words, I miss my dad, but I don't miss how my life used to be. I don't miss Kouri, I will tell you that.
Yeah. Oh, that's so heartbreaking.
It is. And I could see how living with his family, they could talk badly about her and they could potentially put some ideas in their head, but I wouldn't say that I think that that's what happened.
Right.
But
yeah. It does remind me of the one text about, you know, the boys are wondering where you are and when you're going to get here kind of thing. And her like, no, you are you. And it's you that's wondering. And it's like, maybe they were, where is mom? Like, how come she's never around? Like, I don't feel supported by her. Right. But it's also got to be hard growing up from after Eric's death and just everything that's out there. It would be hard.
Yeah, you know? It would be. And I mean, her reactions during this also so crazy. She was, again, scoffing. She laughed at some things, like laughing in disbelief almost, and openly saying like, what? And showed no emotion. In fact, the only time that she showed emotion was when her family members came up talking for her in defense, right? When they were talking about how good she was, and these are the times that she would cry. Of course, Eric's family also talked about the impact of missing Eric, right? And just losing him. No emotion there. You would think even you're not emotional at your kids telling you they don't want to see you again.
Right. And also, like you were saying, the sisters are recalling all these great things about Eric. If you really missed him and you're devastated that he's gone, and remembering the good times and the fact that there's no emotion about that. And actually, I think in the closing argument, the prosecutor pointed out, did you notice that during these testimonies, and I don't remember which one specifically he was talking about, but things that should have been hard to listen to, about someone that you loved and there was no emotion at all, but she did get a little emotional, like when, her good friend Allie Staking got up and, was obviously still is on her side. So pretty much akin to her family, right? The people that are like, she's the best. We love her so much. She is awesome. Well,
Yeah, exactly. We miss you. And she cried when they talked about how good she was or how sad her loss of her boys was. But again, not when they talked about Eric. She was actually bawling as her brother spoke and talked about how much he missed her and the life that was quote unquote stolen from them. So her brother spoke for the defense. Her lawyers read a statement from her mom who felt she couldn't come up without being emotional. And again, kind of did that whole look at both sides of Kouri. They included a lot of people who spoke, and I think for the state, it was like both of Eric's sisters, his brother-in-law Clint, and his dad. I think that's everyone who spoke. And then the statements from her children. And then for the defense, it was like they called a couple people like over the phone and had them do, or like Zoom basically, like maybe her sister-in-law or a sister, half-sister of hers. And they actually had a pastor come and speak, maybe about forgiveness kind of thing and how people can turn around.
That also implies that there's something to turn around from.
Well, at this point, I mean, the family maintains her innocence, but for everyone else, too, at this point, that's already been decided. Now the decision is, will you give her parole or not?
Right.
So the rest of them were more so about don't give her the harshest sentence. More so about let her have an opportunity at some point to try parole. A woman spoke over a Zoom call whose child was killed in an accident, who talked about how she had a really hard time forgiving the person who did it, but at the same time wanted them to be able to live their life or forgave them.
This is someone that's really unrelated to Kouri, but is willing to get up there and say
completely unrelated
how healing it is to, but like challenging, but also healing to forgive. And
And they had a woman speak whose dad killed her mom, and basically that she eventually forgave him. She talked about how for the longest she never wanted to talk to him, maybe kind of how Kouri's children don't want to talk to her, but at some point she eventually did want to reconnect. It was just a lot of, I'm like, well, this is just a lot of things that kind of reminded me of you talking about their closing argument with the different images of grieving women and, well, grieving statues.
Yeah, right.
But I don't know.
That is really interesting because I don't know. I think it's strange to have people who are just preaching a moral concept, right? That's saying, oh, you should forgive and she can change. There's a chance for reconnection with her children later. I don't know. That's just so weird to me. And I understand it, but I think it also disrespects the grieving of the people who lost this person to say, you should just forgive her and you should get over it kind of thing, which I know because of their experience, that's not what they mean by it, but there is a bit of like, yeah, I do have to work on forgiveness. I do have to figure out how to move forward with my life in this really horrible situation, but that doesn't mean that she should get some sort of easy something as a result.
Well, and one of the things that those who spoke on the side of the state mentioned is why a reason that they would like the harshest sentencing, or rather would like for her to not have the chance at parole, was that for her sons, both are kind of saying for her sons, right? Because one is saying for her sons that they would have to every so many years be pulled back into it and go to these parole hearings and state their cases, and Kouri might eventually get out at some point. I don't know how likely she is to hurt another person again. I don't know. But then on the defense, they're saying for the children so that they can one day have an opportunity to reconnect with their mom if they wanted to, which they could reconnect with her in jail. And this girl whose dad killed her mom, I don't recall if he had the opportunity for parole or not. And maybe that was the point, is she wished that he did now that they reconnected, but I don't know.
Yeah.
So, and Kouri spoke. She spoke for like 40 minutes.
Wow.
And spoke directly to her children the whole time. It was a very stereotypical, besides kind of the beginning, she talks about how much she loves them and that they were taken from her, that she would like to reconnect someday when they're ready. And then the rest was kind of just life advice and maybe just like thinking, you may not talk to me ever again, so love big and work hard and don't care what other people think. She did say at one point, I fell in love with someone who is not your dad, and your dad fell in love with someone who is not me. And we both did things behind each other's backs, and we weren't a good example. We sometimes wanted to throw in the towel, but we stuck it through, and don't you do that, and you, blah, 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 when you someday fall in love. So that was, and she wasn't very emotional during that either, besides maybe a couple thick voice-like moments, but no tears that I saw.
I mean, it does remind me of, and obviously I'm not a psychologist, psychiatrist, or whatever, but it does seem like a psychopathy. The fact that, that no emotion of these things or a disregard of others' emotions and the projection of blame onto everybody else. And I don't know, it's very bizarre.
Yeah, it is strange. I saw some people throwing around narcissism as far as her only being emotional when it's talking about her, and
I could see that.
As far as the actual sentencing goes, so for the aggravated murder, she was sentenced to life in prison without possibility of parole. For the attempted aggravated murder, 5 years to life in prison, running consecutively. Then for the fraud, for both of those counts, 1 to 15 years in prison for each count, running consecutively. And then up to 5 years for forgery, also consecutively. The judge spoke. He believed that this was a deliberate, repeated effort, not a single impulsive act. So kind of with that attempted murder beforehand, which, again, whether he thinks it was or not, they found her guilty of also, right, it was a repeated attempt. He emphasized that the jury found the murder was committed for financial gain. In his words, anyone who committed such acts for financial gain is simply too dangerous to ever be free. And then the other reason was for her children. So that was kind of all of sentencing right there.
And like if she wasn't, I don't know. It's kind of like I reflect back on, say, Megan Sundwall, who was very humble and acknowledged things that she did wrong and, just repentant in a way, not admitting that she actually did what they found her guilty of, but that she recognized that she made missteps, all of this. And like, if you can't do that.
Right. Which I also didn't mention that in her statements, she also was like claiming again her innocence, claiming intentions to appeal, not because I care about what anybody else thinks, but because I care what you think. And I want to prove to you boys that I'm innocent. And yeah. So we're going to talk a little bit of backstory here. So we're kind of getting to some of the outside of court stuff. Okay. So Eric Richins was born May 13th, 1982 in Bountiful, Utah. He grew up on the Richins family cattle ranch where he learned to care for horses and cattle, haul hay, mend fences, and work alongside his father. He was the oldest of 3 siblings and was described as fiercely protective of his younger siblings. He was a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and served a 2-year mission in Mexico City where he became fluent in Spanish. He earned a bachelor's degree in international studies with a minor in Spanish from the University of Utah. He played cross-country, basketball, baseball, and soccer, and loved hunting and the outdoors. He went on a lot of hunting trips to Africa, Canada, Mexico, and throughout the United States.
That was his international relations.
Yeah, right. He owned lots of recreational vehicles, and I'm getting most of this from his obituary, but one of these, I was like, he was known for getting into funny accidents. The obituary said, "There was never a dull moment when you were around Eric. Whether it be him showing up to a family dinner with no socks or sleeves on his shirt because he had to make an emergency bathroom stop along the way." Oh, which at first I was like, how are those connected? And I'm like, oh, toilet paper. I'm like, what? That is such a strange thing. But I was like, what he used to just tip. He used to just poop on the side of the road, and you would think if that was a common occurrence, he'd have toilet paper in his car or something.
Right,
his shirt sleeves, rips his shirt sleeves off. Oh my gosh. Leaves, maybe. I'd go for that. That was funny.
That is so funny. And it is a funny thing to include, which does show just the humor of okay, yeah.
It's so funny. He was also heavily involved in coaching his son's sports teams and was described as a very engaged father. He was actually married before.
Oh.
Not sure for how long, but they didn't have any children together and were divorced. There was no public information about that.
Interesting.
Now, Kouri was born on April 20th, 1990 in Oklahoma. She moved to Utah at age 10. May have stopped at 17 other places on the way. Don't know.
Right.
She worked at Home Depot in 2009, which is where she met Eric, since he went there a lot for his work in construction, and he kind of had a crush on her. He got a friend to ask her for her number for him. They started dating and had their first son, and then got married in 2013, and then later had 2 more boys together, as we know. She wrote a book, surprise, after, well, she claims to have written a book, after Eric's death, titled Are You With Me? About grief. I remembered that, like, in the email that she sends to Good Morning Utah or something, she says, I may have written something along the lines of how it may be the first of its kind.
Right.
And I was like, really? 2022? And there have been no children's books about losing parents? That would really surprise me. So I went to look. Are there? And I mean, I don't know how many there are, but there's plenty. There's 12 at least on this list that were written already beforehand. The Boy and the Gorilla, Missing Mommy, A Walk in the Woods, Cape, My Big Dumb Invisible Dragon. And I bet you all of those were better written than her book. It just doesn't even have like a cadence, it's just so strange. It just doesn't really read like a book. And
honestly, I think the content I could get, like the idea of here are all the things that a parent is missing out on, and a child is missing out on their parent seeing them in these situations, and that sense of, man, I don't have this support there anymore. So I, in that way, I can see, I felt like the pictures were a little creepy, not the kids' faces and stuff, like that was cute, but the weird Eric Angel was, I don't know, a little strange to me, but it was better than I thought it was going to be.
Well, maybe because I gave you that warning ahead of time, because I was like, what? It just, I don't know, it just read so strangely to me. Like, it sounded strange. You would think there would be some sort of rhyme or something. Like, I don't know, it's just...
Right. I do think, like, the concept itself, I can totally see the
I'm benefit, in my Christmas pajamas.
I don't, drinking hot chocolate. I don't see, though, a child wanting to have this book read to them over and over, because it doesn't, because like you said, it doesn't have, like, it is teaching an idea or something to a child, but it's not really in an entertaining way or engaging way for a child. It's more like a lecture type of thing or a
weirdly, I think a very simple change would be, are you with me when I'm blah, blah, blah? Next page, yes, I'm with you when you do.
Right.
Instead of a big chunk of, are you with me? 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 And then, yes, I am. Yes, I am. Like, it just feels like, I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. And I think some of it was just a little bit too, I was going to say, it's funny coming from me, too wordy.
Yes, definitely.
Some of it was just too wordy that it should have been simplified for a child, right?
Yes.
But it does, like, that part of it does kind of smack of narcissism that you want to... Am I a narcissist? Oh, gosh.
I don't think so. I think you just want to get all the info out there.
Well,
it's hard to decide what's good or bad.
As I'm saying it, I'm like, oh, okay.
Self-awareness?
Anyway, yeah. So, I do think it could have been simpler because this is not a podcast for children. This is a podcast for adults.
Right.
But this is not a book for adults. This is supposed to be a book for children. So having it be simpler would work better for a children's story.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just like, I could probably off the top of my head or like within a couple minutes think of something that could be better for a lot of those,
Yeah, I'm sure you could.
Yeah.
But you are actually the creative type, so.
I don't know. And again, there's nothing necessarily wrong with the book unless she actually is guilty. And then there's something really wrong with that book. With writing it, with promoting it, with hoping to gain something from it.
Right. And you could say if she's not guilty, it's still not a great book.
Right.
Yeah.
Just objectively not a good book. As far as things that were actively kept out of court, so there were a couple of expert witnesses that the jury didn't get to hear from. One was a domestic violence expert. The defense wanted the jury to hear allegations that Eric had been physically abusive. Kouri said that she'd told Eric's dad that Eric had punched her and given her a black eye and a split lip. She claimed that she had video evidence, but it was never received or found on any of her phones. So basically, the judge excluded it because there wasn't sufficient corroboration and it risked unfairly influencing the jury. So she claims that there was abuse. She claims that there is proof that there was abuse, but that never came forward. So it's hard.
It does with everything else that we've heard makes me wonder, well, was she physically abusive towards him?
Because of all the projection?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, that's just a thought, not a claim.
No, and so they wanted to call the domestic violence expert to talk about patterns of abuse and why somebody might stay in an abusive relationship or hide abuse or behave in ways that outsiders might not understand.
So this would be if the defense chose to put on a case, which they didn't.
True.
So, I don't know. To me, I just feel like if there are all these things that they claim there were, why aren't they showing them?
Yeah, right. Well, and then on the prosecution side, they had an expert witness that was denied that was an FBI behavioral analyst.
Okay.
The prosecution wanted to use a behavioral threat assessment expert who could discuss pathways to violence, which is basically like patterns that researchers have identified in some targeted violence cases.
So a behavioral analyst would be like a profiler.
Right. Well, the judge didn't allow her to testify that Kouri fit a killer profile or use behavioral analysis as proof that she committed the crime.
Yeah. I mean, I can understand that. It would have been interesting, or it would be interesting to know what she believed she saw, not necessarily within the courtroom context, but I am curious what it was that she identified. But I can also see how that could be drawing a legal conclusion that could be problematic, I guess, but I don't know.
It kind of makes me think about, it would have been interesting as far as maybe not was this person a killer, but maybe other parts of their psychology, like maybe not a forensic behavior analyst, but just a behavior analyst in general. Kind of like with Casey Terry with like the snowballing and she committed suicide and he was able to say it wasn't really in her not personality, but her makeup, you know?
Yeah.
But I don't know if maybe it's because of what they wanted them to talk about that he was like, it's too far into like, oh, well, these killers did all these things and she also did those things. And it's like, yeah, but you could do those things and not be guilty.
Sure.
Maybe.
Sure.
So we did hear a little bit about the locksmith trying to get into the safe, which was on March 6th, 2022. So 2 days after Eric died. So while that was happening, Amy, which is, again, Eric's second sister, she went to Eric and Kouri's home and found that Kouri had hired a locksmith to open Eric's gun safe. And she questioned why Kouri hadn't simply asked Eric's father for the combination since he had it. And then according to Amy's testimony, Kouri became enraged. She screamed at Amy to get out of the house. She punched Amy in the face and neck. And It reportedly took 4 people to pull Kouri off of her.
Wow.
Kouri was charged with the Class B misdemeanor assaults in June of that year. On February 14th of the next year, 2023, well, in Amy's statement, she claimed she assaulted me and pled guilty to it, which is not quite true. She entered a no contest plea as part of a plea in abeyance, which is a legal agreement where you plead guilty or no contest, and the judge will delay your sentence, and your charges will get dismissed if you follow some specific rules. So if you do everything that's required, then the court will dismiss your case, and then you wouldn't get a formal conviction on your record. If you break those rules or don't abide by them, don't complete them, then the judge will just enter your guilty plea and give you a conviction. In this case, she was supposed to complete a thinking errors class or grief counseling and pay court-ordered fees. So she obviously didn't do that. Or maybe she did, but it is different than portraying that she said, yeah, okay, I did that.
Yeah, right. She's not taking accountability. And I don't know with the arrest if she would have been out to be able to follow through on some of those things because she was arrested in May of 2023.
So it might have just defaulted.
Right. When did you say the hearing was that she pled no contest?
February 14th, 2023.
Okay, so, I mean, she had a few months, 3 months, that she could have done some of those things, and it sounds like she
it's unsure if she did or didn't. I haven't seen that. So the prosecution wanted that in the court, her assault of Amy. They wanted to argue that the assault showed motive. And their theory was that Kouri had just discovered that Eric had changed his estate plan, and Amy's questioning about the safe triggered an explosive reaction tied to Kouri's frustration over not controlling Eric's assets. But the defense argued, and the judge ended up agreeing with them, that letting the jury hear about the assault created a significant risk that they would think that she assaulted her sister-in-law, so she's the kind of person who would murder her husband.
Yeah, we did hear a little bit of that with, I can't remember if it was Allie or Chelsea that were there. So they had the unofficial celebration of life where friends just came over, and that's where Bryce had his pants off. And
right. Again.
Yeah, and they're just kind of remembering and drinking and whatever. And then Allie and Chelsea had stayed the night. And so they were there that next morning when
Amy came and the locksmith was there.
Right, yeah. And one of them, whoever it was, said that they felt like Kouri's reaction to the situation was understandable and appropriate kind of thing, which is interesting.
Yeah. Beating somebody up is very appropriate.
Right, yep.
I mean, you could also argue that somebody in a state of grief may react in ways they may not usually react.
Sure.
But another thing that was kept out was actually something the prosecution didn't want included, and that was that some items were taken from the home that initially tested positive for presumptive testing for fentanyl.
Oh.
They took them because they had that presumptive positive, but then after more conclusive testing, they came back negative. So, and this was excluded because presumptive testing is known to be unreliable and give false positives, and I think the prosecution didn't want it in there because they couldn't just say, oh, it tested positive. They would have to add everything in, and that later it wasn't positive, so they just didn't want it at all.
Yeah, I mean, but the defense still managed to get that information in by saying, like, nothing ever came back positive. All the things they tested in the house, so they still said it. They just didn't include the fact that the presumptive testing was positive, but then later testing showed negative.
I'm surprised that the defense didn't call, like, the person who did the subsequent testing that came back negative to say, like, yes, the first ones were positive, but after more accurate testing, it was negative, and why is it more accurate, and blah, blah, blah. It's just weird. There's so many people they could have called.
Right. Well, and I think the idea for me is that had they called some witnesses to shore up any of Kouri's claims, that Kouri would have had a better chance of being acquitted. And so to me, I feel like that was a wrong call, and maybe even going over to ineffective representation, because if there are things that you could show the jury that you're saying, hey, this is being inaccurately portrayed, here's other information that shows you this other side of the story that they're saying there is, but they don't ever bring anything in to show that other side. They just want to claim there is another side. And I think it was wrong of them or to not put any of that in if it was there. Like, why not call? I don't know. I mean, so that to me, I say, well, then it really wasn't there. Like, that's my feeling, is it must not really exist. It's just the idea that it could possibly be true, but you actually can't call anyone to support it because you know you don't have the support for it. But if there was support for it, I think it's wrong that they did not call people to share that.
Yeah, I don't know why they wouldn't. Now, there were obviously redacted portions in the Walk the Dog letter.
Yeah.
They pretty much kept a lot of the most important stuff, which was showing their plotting or trying to get a story straight. Some things just didn't look good that they took out. Like, let's see, I don't know if they included this, but please text Lotto or call. Tell him do not text me anything about us doing things together ever. Like church, skiing, trips, nothing that puts us together. It doesn't look good.
I did see that, but I have no idea who that is.
He also, I think his name is Mike something, but he's the one who they talk about him getting a HELOC on something. Did they talk about that in the Walk the Dog letter that you remember?
I don't think so.
He's a pilot, I know, and I'm not sure what, but they must have had a friendly relation as at least skiing, trips, things like that. But she goes in this letter and says, I saw a commercial yesterday with Utah Mortgage Relief. Google them, please. It's for people behind on their mortgage. Can you see if they can help out on Marissa's house, please? We have to get hers, yours, and Chelsea's taken care of ASAP. Try to get that place in Camas. What about asking Lotto to do a loan solely in his name and not have you on there? I know he can do a home equity line of credit on his house in a hideout. Not sure if he would, but I know he has like $1 million in equity.
It is always the constant scramble, like thinking that she's going to find a solution eventually, but she's constantly scrambling to cover things.
And maybe hoping she was going to get out and still be facing all these issues. But she says maybe he just doesn't know about a HELOC. And then in parentheses, home equity.
Well, yeah, of course. Not everyone would know what that is. So,
yeah. If he wants to help me, taking care of these loans is most important. So this is one thing that was definitely redacted. So again, Katie is Eric's sister. Remember, I told you one way to get at Katie is going through my phone and finding a picture of her girls, even with the boys. Print 15 copies and send them out anonymously to different media companies. Obviously, don't email the pictures so it's not traceable. She would be livid if it got out to the public. You would just have to do it sneakily and be careful. She would try it and trace it back to you. If not, no worries. But just like trying to get her daughters out, just like trying to dox kind of her daughters and
even at the expense of her kids, she's saying, even if it's with the boys in it, you know, it's fine. That is really gross. Just to use minors like that to try and get to someone, to try and hurt somebody in some way, when at the same time you're hurting the children.
Right.
And that you don't care about the fact that you're hurting the children in that, if you in turn can end up hurting their mom.
And she says, Sky is having my girls do the first interview with Good Morning America. Please tell Chelsea to bring up that he hasn't been to church in the 13 years she has known him. And Eric would brag to her about how much he drank and did pills in high school. Have Selma talk about Eric in Spain not being able to drink, so he was looking for drugs the entire time. And explain the drink the waitress gave him, and how I called his doctor and went to the pharmacy immediately. Have Allie talk about how the sisters have always been jealous of me because anything they could do, Kouri could do better. Being a mom, college, stay-at-home wife until she built $1 million company, a nice house, car, everything she had, they wanted. This comes down to jealousy, money, and Eric's partying that they didn't want to acknowledge, and sadly, an accidental overdose.
Wow.
Okay. Will you buy a box of Crest white strips, open them up, put in an envelope, and have Sky give them to me? You can tell her what's in the envelope. I'm sure she won't care. I'll make sure they can't be found in my cell. My teeth are yellow from so much coffee and tea all day, frowny face. I love you, I love you, I love you. Hang in there, we're getting there slowly. You're the best mom in the whole world. I'm so lucky to have you. So wow. I did find, basically, how they found that letter was that
the walk the dog letter.
The walk the dog letter was that they kind of were suspicious of something because at a visit with her mom, well, she held up something for her to read, and it's that the camera couldn't see. And so I don't know if they were looking for that specifically or just thinking that she may have something in there.
Well, that does undermine the whole defense's claim that, like, well, yeah, but the letter was still in her cell, so, you know, obviously she didn't get it, when you're like, okay.
Yeah, I mean, and we have no idea what that was on that, but I think she was out for something, and they did a surprise search through all of the cells in that block and found that in a book. But those parts were not allowed in court because they would detract the jury from the murder charges and maybe just invite decisions based on bad character.
Yeah, I don't know. I do feel like one of the confusing things about the walk the dog letter was the idea that, yeah, she wrote this letter, but it was in her cell. So did her mom ever see it? And there was kind of this question. And I guess your point is, well, we can't prove that this is the thing that she was holding up. But we can say that she would do that. She would hold things up for her mom to look at and read out of the view of the camera. Mm-hmm. And so that is a way that she could have shown that letter to her mother. And why would she write it out? Well, because she doesn't want to verbalize it to be caught on video in the jail. And so having her mom read it and then, well, and that also makes like take vague notes is kind of like more like, because it's like, why do you need to take vague notes if you have this paper? You don't you already take it with you. Right. So then it's more like, oh, hey, make notes of these points that I'm giving you right now. Make some vague notes so you remember what I said.
Yeah, that makes sense. So
obviously I still came down with guilty for that because it just seemed like, yeah, it just was too tidy in that way. And it did seem like they were plotting a story rather than it being the truth. Now I understand the letter better of why that title was on there and that instruction, because she couldn't give it to her mom physically. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, actually, that explains a lot.
And I don't know what she was trying to get sent to her in an envelope that was in the teeth whitening box, but...
Was it just the white strips she wanted?
No, she said to open them and put an envelope in there, and Skye won't care.
I thought she was saying put some of the white strips in an envelope and pass them to, but you're right, like, why would she, like, open the box? Or, you know, just saying, hey, I don't know, I thought she was saying, put some teeth whitening strips in an envelope for me and send them with Skye. That's what I thought it was saying.
She says, will you buy a box of Crest white strips, open them up, put in an envelope, and have Skye give them to me?
So I am still thinking she meant put the white strips in an envelope and have Skye pass the white strips on to her, because they're not going to let her take in a box of white strips, but her attorney could give her something, and she felt like, oh, she won't care because it's not really but it truly is contraband. She wasn't allowed to have stuff like that, but it was an innocent ask, and she felt like her attorney would be willing to pass those on to her.
Okay, which makes sense. She's saying, I'll make sure they can't be found in my cell.
Yep.
Okay, that makes sense. I was like, what is she trying to get snuck into the box? Like, but they would open that.
Right,
you
right.
know?
Yep.
So... okay, that makes sense.
Which, again, that just shows that she's willing to be shady by trying to use her attorney to get her contraband. You know, I mean, that's just a disregard of this attorney. You're having them break the rules for you and expecting that of them, which is just, yeah.
Yeah. Again, just, like, it's just, she just doesn't have very good character. It's just obvious in all of her scheming, not only after, but before his death as well. She schemes all the time.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I don't see the fact that she wanted Crest white strips as painting her as a murderess, which I know you're not saying that, but
I'm just meaning the other things in the letter.
For sure.
Okay, the biggest thing that could not be included in court was interviews with Hayden Jeffs. We heard about Hayden Jeffs at the beginning, but here's kind of a refresher. He was a 35-year-old handyman who worked for Kouri on several of her real estate projects, and investigators became interested in him after multiple witnesses identified him as someone Kouri knew and communicated with around the time of Eric's death. He was the one who died in the motorcycle accident.
Oh, that's right. Okay, I was like, that name is familiar to me.
They interviewed him, and during the interview with him, he said that Kouri asked him if he could get fentanyl. He also said that she asked about propofol, which he described as the Michael Jackson drug.
Yep.
He reportedly showed investigators text messages that corroborated those conversations and provided copies of them.
Wow.
So that would have been a big thing.
It was only left out because he died.
Yep. Because he was deceased, the defense could not cross-examine him. His recorded police interviews became hearsay, and the prosecution had to fight over whether any of his statements could come in under a hearsay exception.
Wow. That is crazy to me that someone's statements that are recorded with police it's just so crazy to me.
Well, it's because there's a Sixth Amendment confrontation clause, which states that a criminal defendant would have the right to confront and cross-examine the witnesses against them. And because they actually just physically could not do that. I mean, imagine if you could only take Carmen's first ever interview and that's all you got from that versus what she gave later and all the back and forth they were able to do. Yeah, they weren't able to cross-examine. And so...
Yeah. But to me, it's like, okay, well, if you have... I mean, I understand that there's an amendment that makes it that way to protect people. And I also feel like if you have text messages back and forth between the two of them, well, how about a cell phone analyst including those text messages back and forth between the two? Because that could get in, right? So maybe he can't testify, but does the person who is on the other end of the text chain have to be alive and present to admit that into evidence about this conversation taking place?
I mean, it does seem that every time they're entering text conversations in, they show it to the person and the person has to say, yes, I remember that, or that looks right.
Well, I mean, that has been true. However, the forensic accountant actually entered in the text chain between Kouri and Chelsea Barney that had to do with the $45,000 down payment for the house.
Right, which she also testified at some point, so maybe that's why, because they could ask her about it if they wanted to.
Right, yeah, she did later, but I'm like, I mean, we see the whole text chain in other trials that were between the victim and the defendant. I don't know, it seems to me that there should be a way to get some of that evidence in but it's probably just that I don't understand the law. But to me, it does seem like these are messages from Kouri herself back and forth to an individual. So it seems like that should be included. And guess what? The conversation between Bryce and Kouri, he never testified.
True.
But Chelsea was present during the recording and she testified. But Bryce didn't have to say anything.
True. And it seems like the prosecution really tried to get some of his statements in under a hearsay exception, but I guess ultimately the judge decided not to include them. Who knows what exactly it said? Maybe it wasn't very clear, or maybe...
Yeah, it's hard to know. I mean, so obviously the girlfriend, Anna, did testify to what she overheard of that conversation, of the one conversation. The defense attorney asked about her being an alcoholic and going through alcohol treatment and being better now. And, well, maybe you didn't hear what you thought you heard because you might have been drunk. I know you're an alcoholic, a recovering alcoholic, but you're probably not accurate, which is kind of offensive when we know that she knows that Hayden reported that was the conversation that they had. So to cast shade on Anna for telling something that actually matches up with what Hayden's testimony was, but that can't come into court because he's dead, then that is just more gross.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I mean, that was the only reason that they, forced her to come and testify, because that was the only way they could get any of that in.
Yeah.
And it's really unfortunate. I mean, of course, for him to have passed for so many other reasons, but for this case specifically, really unfortunate that I'm sure that would have been a really key part of this case.
Right. Yeah, definitely. I think it would have, well, I'm like, can you get easier than 3 hours? I don't know, a 3-hour verdict. You know what I mean? Like they were able to come to it pretty quickly, even without that piece of the puzzle. But it does seem like, okay, it makes it a more direct, like, okay, easy peasy connection that wasn't quite as easy to make that connection without it.
I forgot that I wrote this. So during trial, there was discussion that the defense came very close to opening the door to some of Jeff's otherwise inadmissible statements. And the judge warned that if the defense created a misleading impression about the investigation, for example, by suggesting that the police had no basis for pursuing certain leads, some of Jeff's statements might become admissible to correct that impression. And so the defense ultimately backed away from that line of questioning and the statements stayed out. So the judge was kind of like, hey, you didn't want these statements in, but if you start saying things that are false.
Right.
misleading, then we will be able to put these in to show that that's not true. So,
right.
Just because it's not admissible doesn't mean that you can...
Doesn't get to mean you get to say whatever you want.
Right, exactly.
And actually, that's the complaint that I have about this defense team. I understand that every defendant has a right to a vigorous defense, but to me, there's a line that should not be crossed, and that is a total misrepresentation of reality. And what I was hearing, I felt was crossing over that a bit, that it was acting as though things were true that then we know weren't true, but they're still saying them as, I feel like that's unethical. I feel like it's wrong. And that's just from a layman's perspective. It doesn't seem ethical to me. I don't know, based on legal ethics, whether they cross that line, but that bothers me.
I feel like if I were a defense attorney and I could see myself in that role in, I don't know if everyone does, but I imagine a lot of people start out with that of wanting to defend those who could be accused of things that they didn't do.
Right, that you believe in their innocence.
I don't think that many people start out as defense attorneys thinking, oh, I'm going to help a lot of guilty people get out. But you have to make money at some point, right? But I don't think I personally could bring myself to, I think that if you are guilty, you're advised not to share that with your lawyer.
Right.
So they're not completely making things up. So they can pretend that they don't know, I think. But it is just I think I could do my best to present facts in the best light. But I very strongly believe that both for prosecution and defense, that the evidence should speak for itself if you are innocent or if you are guilty.
Right.
I would not be accusing people of being drunks and maybe you didn't actually hear that. I'm like, what? That is not a line of questioning that makes sense to me.
Right.
And it feels icky.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I do think it's okay, well, I want to make sure as your attorney, the defendant has a right to due process under the law, right? Were laws followed? Your constitutional rights, were those protected? Are there any ways that was mishandled? Those are important questions to ask, and we have a constitution for a reason. So it's appropriate for a defense attorney to look at all of those things, but not to just make up crazy, because here's the thing. They said, if there is another explanation for this outcome, then that's reasonable doubt. It's not just a reasonable explanation. It has to be reasonable based on the evidence, right. Not just based on, in some universe, it could be true, but the evidence doesn't support that as a possibility. So, just saying, well, if it could have been that this thing, but I'm but it wasn't.
Yeah.
It wasn't, but you're just saying because it could have been in some situation, but it's yeah, but only could it have been in this situation? And the answer to that is no.
It's like the divorce attorney that Kouri talked to about yeah, but don't you also do stuff to do with properties? Yeah, but it was about divorce. So why? It doesn't make sense. And even if she sought out a divorce attorney, that does not mean that she killed him.
Right.
So it's stupid to fight every single little thing and act as if she was an angel who never did anything wrong.
Right.
It's you can make concessions of yeah, she did this thing, but that doesn't mean this.
Right.
Which
yeah,
I think is fair.
Right. Yeah.
There's other things, but
right. Yeah, going to see a divorce attorney, that makes sense. He was too, right? But it's weird to me that later on she represents it as, well, I only went because he went first. But you didn't know that he'd gone first when you went.
Right.
So, but now it's looking backwards and applying your now knowledge to what you did before. It's okay that I saw a divorce attorney because he did it first. But that's not the reason you went, because you didn't find out he went to a divorce attorney until years later.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not why you did it.
I kind of feel unless I really, really thought that somebody actually was innocent and they were wrongly convicted, if I thought, what, the evidence said what it said, and do you believe in the justice system? Do you believe that people who commit crimes should go to jail? or be punished? Do you feel like there should be a consequence to people committing crimes, or do you just want everybody to be free as long as you're getting paid to be their defense attorney? And I feel like most people would want guilty people to go to prison or to be found guilty if they are guilty.
Right.
So I don't understand why so many defense lawyers seem so disgusted when their client is found guilty, and in most likelihood they are guilty. And just like, okay, well, we did what we could within the scope of the facts, and that's what was decided. And
which is, it's more flabbergasting when you recognize that the defense attorneys had all of this information that we didn't have. So they know much better than we do whether this evidence does strongly indicate guilt versus innocence. And so then to just be,
are they just susceptible to manipulation? I just don't know. And they are comforting her during the sentencing, and she, I know, and also shaking their heads and just, yeah.
I'm curious how long they will remain her attorneys.
Right. Well, I don't know. They weren't successful, so. As far as the public opinion of all of this goes, most people do agree with the verdict. There are some that think that there was not enough direct evidence. But again, we know that circumstantial evidence is also still evidence. But some people think that they never were able to prove how she actually got the fentanyl. I think mostly because of Carmen's kind of flip-flop in the beginning.
Right.
And kind of maybe buy into that sweetheart deal, changing her story kind of thing. Or maybe they only heard bits and pieces of the trial and didn't actually watch everything. There are some that say that she was a serial killer in the making who was stopped before she could become one. Now, I don't know how I could find if this is true or not, but I did see multiple people say that Josh Grossman actually, in hindsight, thought that Kouri maybe had tried to poison him at some point. I guess he ate some hush puppies that she had brought, and he kind of had a weird reaction and fell asleep for a long period of time afterwards.
They do. During his testimony, they showed that chain where he talks about that.
Yeah. So I think in hindsight, he was like, oh, I don't know, was that maybe?
Did he have a life insurance policy that she was a beneficiary?
I don't think so, but I also heard that people say that he has a wallet will that stated on paper that Kouri had everything to do with Eric's death, and that if anything happens to him, to immediately investigate Kouri, and that he's not a druggie or suicidal. So, but I'm like, she was arrested by the time you knew this, so now what? You think she's going to hire a hitman? Or if I die, it was Kouri? Well, Kouri's in prison.
So the idea is
that why
had he written this a long time before she got arrested and thinking that? Or
well, I think the idea is that he has that now, and so I just don't know the purpose.
Well, you obviously have family members that
true
they believe, I don't know,
but some think that he could have been a future victim of hers or even her children. So
yeah,
I don't know.
We like to think that a mother would never do that. But unfortunately, we know that it does happen, and people, have some warped sense of, I don't know, that just allows them to do things that normal people would never do.
Think of Josh Powell, and for him, maybe it was like things were closing in on identifying him as the killer, which wouldn't be the case maybe here. But, he had no reason to also kill his children.
Right.
But
That's
he did.
Terrible.
And he had first killed their mom, so.
Allegedly.
Yes, allegedly, but he's not here to sue us, so. So what now? Well, Kouri has filed an appeal and has asked for a new trial, which are two different things and two different procedures. Filing an appeal goes to an appellate court, and they kind of go over things, and then asking for a new trial actually goes to the judge. And the judge will kind of go over things, but the judge has actually kind of washed his hands of it and asked another judge to step in because he feels like he couldn't be fair with his own things he may have done. So, I don't know. I mean, there was the stuff about the book that we talked about, like, that maybe didn't really need to be there. Maybe they might find that a new trial is required, but I don't know. They might also find, like you, that, but it probably didn't have that much. There was enough other things.
Right.
So her team is claiming that the info about her financial misconduct was prejudicial and should not have been admissible. So that's the one thing that they don't want to talk about. But partially, she was being charged for financial stuff with that, so it did apply. But not
but it definitely goes to motive, right?
Yes.
Like, it definitely goes to motive. So I don't see... I get maybe they're saying as far as, like, her misrepresenting C&E's bank statement and saying that it was hers.
Like the crimes committed and not just the financial state. Because taking out a bunch of payday loans is not a crime.
No, that's true. But I mean, I do think that showing the desperation, the lengths that she was willing to go to try and cover this, I do think that that builds the case for motive. It's not about her being a bad person, but it is about her inability to handle the finances effectively, which then led to this mounting pressure that contributed to the motive. So I agree
with you. I don't think that they have any basis for this. But I also think that it shows her inability to wash her hands of it and just be like, okay, I need help. Things have gotten out of control. Like, she continued to just dig and dig and dig and dig deeper instead of declaring bankruptcy or doing any of those things. She just continued to dig herself deeper and try to find other ways out of it.
Right.
As far as her other legal battles, she is facing 26 pending financial charges.
Wow.
Including 7 counts of money laundering, 7 counts of issuing bad checks, 5 counts of mortgage fraud, 5 counts of forgery, and 1 count of communications fraud, and 1 count of engaging in a pattern of unlawful activity.
Wow.
She also has 3 civil lawsuits in the works. So a month after she was arrested, Kouri sued the estate for half of the equity of their family home and a share of his stonemasonry business and some various personal property. So Katie, as the trustee, sued her right back in that same month. They sued her for $13 million, accusing Kouri of structural fraud, theft, and converting Eric's assets for her real estate business. And then Eric's family and his living trust doubled down by filing a $10 million wrongful death lawsuit, specifically targeting her for the poisoning. So this is all kind of in the works, but after her conviction, her case was dismissed due to the Slayer statute. So her original case that she sued them was dismissed because under Utah law, a convicted murderer cannot inherit or financially benefit from their victim.
Right.
And the judge's summary judgment officially rendered Kouri's lawsuits moot, unfreezing Eric's estate so his assets could safely pass into a trust for his children.
So the only way that would change, or those could become active again, would be if her conviction was overturned or something like that. Yes. And then they would okay, go back to that. Which I do understand why Eric's family might go for a civil wrongful death trial, because if she was acquitted,
then
for
that would
some
be the
reason,
other thing to go for.
Yeah, that it's but you can still be held civilly liable because the burden is lower.
Yes. And it seems like maybe because of her initial lawsuit, maybe those assets were frozen while things were being litigated.
Right.
So they were able to unfreeze that by dismissing her case after she was found guilty. And then as far as the other 2 cases, her lawyers, her civil lawsuit lawyers, withdrew from the 2 cases against her by the trust after she was found guilty. So they will most likely go uncontested. And my thought was okay, $23 million that they're probably going to be yep, guilty.
But you don't got it.
How is she going to pay that?
Right. Her 25 cents an hour working in the prison laundry for the next, 50 years.
Which, I mean, we know on a smaller scale, Bruno was in a car accident. That was another lady's fault, and that lady did not have insurance, and Bruno had liability insurance, so couldn't cover his own car. She went to court, and she was supposed to pay us a certain amount of money. We're never going to see it. Never have seen any of it. Unless we really pursued it and got our checks garnered, maybe. And that was only a couple $1,000s, probably. So, $23 million. So, any money that she makes from speaking with documentaries or from her book sales or anything else would go directly to the estate. So, it might not ever reach $23 million, but any money that she might make would go directly towards that.
Do you know if her book is still out there?
I did see it on Amazon, but wasn't sure if you could actually buy it or not.
Mm.
It might have been like unavailable or something. Or if family members or friends deposit money into Kouri's prison commissary account to buy snacks or make phone calls, the judgment allows the estate to garnish a percentage of those outside funds.
Gosh.
And if a family member leaves Kouri an inheritance or property in a future will, the standing civil judgment automatically attaches to it, routing those assets to Eric's estate.
Wow.
So they likely won't get much of that money, but it is worth pursuing for those reasons. Like, why not just drop it if you weren't going to ever see that money? Well, you might see some of it.
Right.
So,
did you ever look at what any jurors had to say?
They did do a poll of the jurors afterwards, which was requested by the defense, which basically is verifying. They asked them all individually is this the verdict that you agreed to?
And one of them said, hell yes.
Yeah, one of them did.
What? Are you kidding?
I think so. Now all of a sudden I was like, wait, did they? But at least one was for sure very, yes I did, like very
strong.
Yeah. So the foreperson said that we were really sad because we did not want to find her guilty. They wanted her to be innocent, which is good. I think you should either, as a juror, go into a trial either making a conscious, like, okay, I'm gonna clean slate, no expectations, or wanting them to be innocent, not to a point where you would ignore evidence, but...
Yeah, I do think that's the right attitude, is saying, well, I'm going to believe in her innocence and hope for her innocence until the evidence shows me overwhelmingly that that's not the case.
Right, and that's how it should be, right?
Yeah.
You're innocent until proven guilty. So she also shared that the verdict was never close. There was never a not guilty check with anything.
Wow.
So she also mentioned that she felt that Kouri was very difficult to read, and that she showed very little emotion, and that she couldn't get a sense of what she was thinking, which I think is intentional. There was a girl named Christie. She gave a long interview about it, but she emphasized that she came in with no preconceived opinions, tried to keep an open mind. She was surprised that the defense rested without calling witnesses.
Mm-hmm.
She described the moment as utter shock. She said that the undercover narcotics officer was one of the witnesses that affected her most, but it says that testimony wasn't live streamed. And then Josh Grossman and Eric's family members. There wasn't any, one smoking gun that she could think of, just that the evidence fit together into a picture that convinced the jury beyond reasonable doubt. So those were
interesting.
Two of the jurors that have spoken. But yeah, I mean, if nobody ever said not guilty, I'm surprised it even took 3 hours, but... I guess they probably did talk about it a little bit.
Well, and I think they have to read through all the instructions and everything, which is all the legal jargon and all of that. It's a lengthy process, so I'm sure that's probably what took up the 3 hours in filling out the form. And
right, and they could have also been, started talking about it because that's what you're supposed to do, and then maybe gotten to a point where they're like, I think we're all agreeing, so maybe we should just vote.
Yeah, right.
When asked why deliberation was so short, she said that they'd all taken detailed notes and paid close attention, and that they'd already mentally evaluated much of the evidence before deliberations officially began. So once they got into the jury room, they mainly compared notes and worked through the verdict forms together. There you go.
Yeah, right. They're like, yep, we all are in agreement. We came to the same conclusions, which I do think that the fact that you can't discuss it ahead of time is helpful because each person has to come to their conclusion independently before they start talking to anybody. And then, of course, other people's take on things could end up changing someone's mind. But the fact that they had all come to the same place and nobody had to be convinced, I think shows that there was a strong case presented that everybody had independently come to the same conclusion.
Yeah. So, I don't know, will she actually get to appeal?
She's appealing,
right.
But she ain't getting one. That's what I think. I think there's no way. I guess technically they could decide that she should have a second trial because of certain things that were let in, but I don't know that there's really grounds for that, but they always try it.
Yeah, or they even always say they're going to and don't always. So even the fact that they actually have is a step in that direction, but
yeah,
I agree with you. I don't think it's going anywhere. And there were a couple of things that I was actually informed by one of our listeners that we either hadn't heard before or actually got wrong. So big thanks to Tirdad Durakshani, 1940. We tried our best with your name, but we Appreciate all of your detailed comments. And yeah, we learned some stuff. So...
And I would say if you want to go onto YouTube and look at the episodes there, comments are made on multiple of the episodes that add in a lot of detail that maybe we didn't know some of the backstory about some of those things, because obviously I don't know backstories about those things. So I think they are worth reading. There's a lot of good stuff in there.
Yeah, some of it were things that we touched on later. We just hadn't gotten to that point in the trial. But again, some was new info to me. So one of the things that we misunderstood from the trial was that even though Kouri tried to have Eric cremated, he actually was not cremated, which we had that question. We're like, can you cremate someone if they have in their will that they want to be buried or they don't want to be cremated? And I don't know what the definitive answer is there, but in this specific case, at least, his family presented the will that showed that he wanted to be buried and not cremated, and so they followed his wishes in that regard.
Yeah, it's good to know that, and that does bring up the point that if someone wanted to do hair testing of Eric's hair, they could actually do that if they got an order for exhumation. But no one has done that, so...
With the suspicious circumstances, I'm surprised that they didn't take hair anyway, just with drugs being involved. But I don't know, I guess there was enough other evidence to point towards foul play.
Right. The other issue is that Kouri's insisting that he didn't use drugs, and so there was no reason to think that maybe if we tested the hair, we would see some long history of drug use that we could see in the hair strand, because it was a whole year that she was saying, no, he didn't use drugs. And so I don't know at what point they changed that story, but by then he was long buried.
Right. I think even then they still should have, because you don't always know your spouse. There are cases of spouses having very intricate second lives that somebody has no idea about. So maybe
like Kouri.
True. Right. Yes. Well, but maybe according to her knowledge, he might not have abused drugs, but he could have been hiding it. Right. I'm not saying that I think he was, but that would be a reason to do the testing, even if the wife claims that the husband didn't use drugs.
Right, for sure.
Also, he had pretty short hair. Like how, I guess I don't know that much about that, but when you talked about like how you can see history of drug use, like how far back, at least my husband gets his hair cut at least once a month, so...
Right. Yeah, I don't know how far up the follicle it shows if his hair was short. Yeah. It's hard to know how much information they would have been able to get from that, but...
Now I want to know. A standard 1.5-inch head hair sample covers roughly 90 days, meaning shorter hair reduces the timeline proportionally. About 30 days of history per 0.5 inches of hair.
So they might have been able to tell at least a 30-day history of potential drug use.
Right. I wonder, beard hair. But was he clean-shaven when he died? Because there are pictures of him with a beard. Okay, beard hair can be used to determine a drug use history. It detects up to 12 months because it grows slower and spends far longer in a resting phase. Unlike head hair, which grows predictably at 0.5 inches per month, beard hair cannot be easily segmented to pinpoint exactly when a drug was taken. It only yields a simple positive or negative result from the overall multi-month window. So,
yeah.
Interesting. So, I have a lot more history on my head than,
That's right.
than some people might. That's kind of interesting to think about. And then the other thing was, I was obviously aware of the children's victim impact statements that were made in the sentencing hearing, but I never heard some of the statements that they had made that were not introduced in trial at all. And kind of a big one is that the children's reported events of the night that Eric died are actually very different from what Kouri reports. As a reminder, Kouri's story is she goes into bed with her middle child. Either he was sick or he had a nightmare or didn't want to sleep alone, one of those things. But the kids claimed that they were sent to bed without bats, which was unusual for them. And multiple attempts were made to actually go into the parents' room that were thwarted, basically.
Right. I did read that the middle child, the TV was on really loud in the parents' room, and he tried to sneak into their room and was yelled at and told to leave. And then the youngest child went down to crawl into bed with them, like he often does, and found the door locked. And so he went and got into bed with the middle child.
So, I mean, that's a very different story. I assumed that the story was like she put it out, but that she was aware of what was happening and that she had drugged him, right? But that she still was out of the room, and maybe more as like a protection for herself, like of innocence, right? But that the whole story was not real at all, or the possibility of that is very interesting.
Yeah. I wondered what the kids were saying about that night, if they were agreeing, yeah, my mom was in my room all night, or what. And so that answers that question. Apparently, the kids were telling a different story, and it just didn't come into court. I'm sure there were concerns about them being minors.
Right. My assumption would be that they would have actually had to testify in court so that they could be cross-examined, and you couldn't just put their story in to evidence. So I imagine that's one of the reasons that didn't happen, due to their age.
I can understand that choice because obviously they've already experienced a lot of trauma going through the situation in the first place, all the media attention, their dad being gone, their mom being in prison. I mean, it's a pretty horrible situation. They were pretty young at the time, and thankfully they didn't need that information in order to convict Kouri, because for those who maybe were a little bit on the fence, that definitely... Fence removed.
Yeah, it's hard to tell a lie that involves someone else without being in agreement on this, at least, because they might have been confused in the beginning of like, I don't want to say that what she said happened didn't happen, but yeah.
We also did find out about the attorneys that had represented Kouri initially, that it was a pretty disrespectful relationship. Kouri towards the attorney, saying disrespectful things about her in conversations with her family members on the jail calls.
Yeah, and all of the things that could have been client attorney privilege, she talked about very freely on recorded jail calls, so...
The defense team wanted to paint it as, like I said about the PI, where they're like, oh, sure, you didn't look at those private communications because you guys seem to have insider knowledge, and apparently in pretrial motions or preliminary hearings, the defense had brought up those concerns about them listening in, accusing the state of listening in on privileged phone calls. And the state was able to play recordings of those jail calls showing that Kouri laid out in detail every single thing that she talked to her attorney about. And her conversations with her mom are not privileged, even though she's sharing information that would have been privileged. Now it's not, because she's not talking to her attorney.
Totally. She was fully aware. People are aware that they're being recorded when they're on their jail calls, so...
All right. A special thanks to Tirdad for this bonus snippet at the end of this episode. We appreciate you sharing your knowledge with us. We are always interested in your comments and your feedback. If there is something that you want to get to us that you feel is important, you can email us at hungthepodcast@gmail.com. And also recognize that there might be information we haven't gotten to yet, or there is likely information that I don't know, but would be good for Maryn to know. So that is helpful.
Yeah, right.
And we hope you'll join us next time for our next case.
Yeah.
Until then,
I'm Maryn.
I'm Christie.
And you've been listening to Hung.